What if everything you've been blaming was never the real cause? What if the people who ignored you, the opportunities that seemed out of reach, the circumstances that appeared to stand in your way, were never the true source of your struggles? What if the world you've been trying so hard to change has only been reflecting something that already exists within you? Most people spend their lives fighting appearances. They try to force change in relationships, careers, finances, and circumstances, believing that if the outside world changes first, then they can finally feel successful, loved, secure, or fulfilled. But what if the opposite is true? Today, we're going to explore a life-changing principle. The world is not happening to you. It is responding to you. Every experience, every interaction, every result is connected to the state of consciousness you consistently occupy. The outer world is a mirror, faithfully reflecting the beliefs, assumptions, and feelings you hold within. This understanding shifts all power back into your hands. No longer are you a victim of circumstances. No longer are you dependent on people or conditions to determine your future. The moment you change within, the reflection begins to change without. So listen closely, because what you're about to discover may completely transform the way you see yourself, others, and the world around you. Look around at your life for a moment. Observe the people you encounter, the opportunities that appear before you, the challenges you face, and the circumstances that seem to define your reality. Most people believe that these things exist independently of them. They assume that life is happening to them, that external events determine their happiness, success, and peace of mind. Because of this belief, they spend countless hours trying to manipulate conditions, persuade people, and force outcomes. Yet, despite all their effort, they often find themselves repeating the same patterns over and over again. Why? Because they are attempting to change the reflection without changing the source that produces it. Imagine standing in front of a mirror. If you dislike what you see, would you try to alter the image in the glass? Of course not. You understand instinctively that the reflection can only change when the person standing before it changes first. The mirror has no power of its own. It simply reflects what is placed before it. In the same way, the world around you acts as a mirror to your inner state of consciousness. It reflects your dominant assumptions, beliefs, expectations, and feelings. What you consistently accept as true within yourself eventually appears as experience in your outer world. This understanding can be difficult at first, because we have been conditioned to trust appearances. When you see an unwanted circumstance and immediately conclude that it is the cause of our discomfort, we encounter rejection and believe another person has the power to determine our worth. We face financial difficulty and assume that money itself is the problem. Yet appearances are only effects. They are shadows cast by deeper causes. The real cause lies within the invisible realm of consciousness, where every belief and assumption is formed. Think about how often your expectations influence your experiences. If you expect disappointment, you begin to notice signs that support that expectation. If you assume people are against you, you become sensitive to every action that seems to confirm it. If you believe success is difficult, you interpret obstacles as proof that your belief is correct. Over time, these assumptions become so familiar that they appear to be objective facts. In reality, they are internal states being reflected back to you through the circumstances of life. The remarkable thing is that the world does not judge whether your assumptions are positive or negative. It simply mirrors them. It responds to the image you hold of yourself and the reality you accept within. If you see yourself as capable, valuable, and deserving, life begins to present experiences that align with those qualities. If you see yourself as limited, overlooked, or unlucky, the world reflects those assumptions as well. The mirror remains neutral. It faithfully reproduces whatever stands before it. This is why lasting transformation never begins with external circumstances. It begins with a shift in awareness. When you change your inner conversation, you change the blueprint from which your experiences emerge. When you adopt a new assumption about yourself, you create a new pattern that the outer world must eventually reflect. At first, appearances may seem unchanged. The mirror may still display traces of the old image, but persistence in a new state gradually produces a new reflection. The power of this realization is immense. It means that your future is not controlled by conditions, other people, or past experiences. It means that no circumstance has the final word unless you continue to give it authority within your consciousness. The moment you understand that the outer world is a reflection, you stop treating appearances as permanent realities. Instead, you begin working on the source. You direct your attention inward, knowing that every transformation in your life must first occur within you. The world you see today is reflecting yesterday's assumptions. The world you will see tomorrow is being shaped by the assumptions you choose today. Therefore, do not become discouraged by current appearances. They are only reflections of previous states. Instead, focus on cultivating the inner reality you desire. See yourself as the person you wish to be. Feel the emotions you would experience if your desire were already fulfilled. Accept that new state as natural and true. As you persist in that inner transformation, something extraordinary begins to happen. The reflection starts to change. Opportunities appear unexpectedly. Relationships shift. Circumstances rearrange themselves in ways that once seemed impossible. What changed? Not the mirror. The source changed. And because the source changed, the reflection had no choice but to follow. The outer world has never been the cause. It has always been the reflection. And when you understand this truth, you reclaim the creative power that has been within you all along. One of the most profound realizations you can ever have is that the way people respond to you is deeply connected to the way you see yourself. Most individuals spend years trying to understand why certain relationships keep repeating the same patterns. They wonder why they continue to attract the same type of treatment, the same disappointments, the same misunderstandings, or the same emotional experiences. They analyze the behavior of others, searching for answers outside themselves. Yet the real key is often much closer than they imagine. The concept you hold of yourself becomes the foundation upon which your interactions with others are built. Every person carries an invisible image of who they believe themselves to be. Some see themselves as respected and appreciated. Others see themselves as overlooked, rejected, or unworthy. These ideas may not always be conscious, but they influence every thought, feeling, and expectation. Over time, they become so familiar that they feel like undeniable facts. Because of this, people often expect the world to confirm what they already believe about themselves. And more often than not, it does. Imagine someone who secretly believes they are not important, even if they appear confident on the surface. This assumption influences how they interpret the actions of others. A delayed text message feels like rejection. A brief conversation feels like dismissal. A small misunderstanding feels like proof that they are not valued. Their inner concept shapes their perception, and eventually their experiences begin to reflect it. They encounter situations that seem to validate their belief, reinforcing the cycle again and again. Now consider someone who genuinely sees themselves as worthy of respect and appreciation. They move through life with a different expectation. They do not constantly seek validation because they already possess it within. They assume they are valued, and because of that assumption, they naturally attract experiences that reflect it. People respond differently to them. Opportunities appear more easily. Relationships tend to feel healthier and more balanced. The difference is not merely in the behavior of others, it begins with the belief held within. The world is constantly responding to the image you carry of yourself. This is why changing people without changing yourself often leads to frustration. You may leave one relationship and enter another, only to discover the same emotional patterns reappearing. You may change environments, jobs, or social circles and still encounter familiar challenges. The reason is simple: wherever you go, you bring your self-concept with you. If the inner image remains unchanged, the reflection often remains the same. Many people believe that others possess independent power to determine their worth, happiness, or success. They wait for approval, recognition, or affection before allowing themselves to feel valuable. But this approach places the source of fulfillment outside of themselves. True transformation occurs when you reverse that process. Instead of seeking value from others, you begin by accepting your own value. Instead of waiting to feel love, you cultivate the feeling of being loved within yourself. Instead of hoping others will see your worth, you first recognize it internally. When your self-concept changes, your expectations change. When your expectations change, your behavior changes. When your behavior changes, the responses you receive from the world begin to change as well. What once seemed impossible starts to feel natural. Relationships that felt difficult become easier. New people enter your life who align with your new assumptions. Situations that once triggered insecurity lose their power. All of this occurs because the foundation has shifted. It is important to understand that this principle is not about controlling others. It is about transforming yourself. The focus is never on forcing people to act differently. The focus is on becoming a different version of yourself internally. When you embody confidence, respect, love, and worthiness within, the outer world naturally begins to mirror those qualities back to you. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to observe your self-concept. If someone's behavior upsets you, ask yourself what belief it may be reflecting. If a recurring pattern appears in your relationships, look beyond the person and examine the assumption beneath the experience. The answers are often found within rather than outside. The moment you stop defining yourself by the actions of others, you reclaim your power. You realize that your worth does not depend on another person's opinion. Your value is not determined by circumstances. It is established within your own consciousness. And once you accept a higher concept of yourself, the world begins to respond to that new image. People can only reflect the story you consistently tell yourself about who you are. Therefore, choose that story carefully. See yourself as respected, appreciated, loved, and valuable. Accept those qualities as natural. Live from that assumption daily. As you do, the people around you will begin to reflect the change, not because they have suddenly become different, but because you have. Change your concept of yourself, and the reflection in others will inevitably change as well. One of the greatest mistakes people make is spending their lives fighting reflections. They see an unwanted circumstance appear in their world, and immediately they begin battling the appearance itself. They argue with reality, resist what they see, complain about conditions, blame people, and struggle endlessly to force change on the outside. Yet, despite all their effort, the same situations often continue to return in different forms. This happens because they are attempting to solve the effect while ignoring the cause. They are fighting the reflection instead of transforming the source from which the reflection comes. Imagine standing in front of a mirror and noticing that your reflection is frowning. It would be absurd to reach toward the glass and try to force the image to smile. No matter how much energy you invest, the reflection cannot change first. The image only responds to the person standing before it. Change the expression on your face, and the reflection changes automatically. The principle is simple, yet it contains a profound truth about life itself. The outer world functions much like that mirror. What appears before you is not the cause of your experience. It is the result of an inner state that has already been accepted within consciousness. Most people have been conditioned to believe the opposite. They believe circumstances create thoughts and feelings. If the bank account grows, they feel abundant. If relationships improve, they feel love. If success arrives, they feel confident. Their inner state is entirely dependent upon external evidence. The problem with this approach is that it gives all authority to appearances. It forces a person to wait for the reflection to change before they allow themselves to experience the feeling they desire. But true transformation begins when you stop reacting to appearances and stop understanding their purpose. Every circumstance is feedback. Every experience is revealing something about the state you have been occupying. Rather than becoming upset by what you see, you can learn from it. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, What assumption within me is being reflected here? This simple shift changes everything because it moves your attention away from blame and toward awareness. When something unwanted appears, the natural tendency is to panic. A person receives bad news, encounters rejection, experiences financial difficulty, or faces an unexpected obstacle, and immediately they allow the circumstance to determine their emotional state. Fear begins to grow. Doubt takes over. The mind starts creating stories that reinforce the problem. Yet every moment spent dwelling on the appearance gives additional energy to the very state that produced it. The reflection is strengthened because attention remains fixed upon it. The wiser approach is to recognize that appearances are temporary expressions of previous assumptions. They are echoes of states that have already been entertained. Just because something appears before you does not mean it has the power to define your future. It only reveals where your consciousness has been focused. The moment you understand this, you stop treating circumstances as permanent realities. You begin viewing them as indicators pointing back toward the source. This does not mean ignoring life or pretending problems do not exist. It means refusing to grant appearances the authority to dictate your identity. A circumstance may be present, but it does not have to determine who you are. You can choose a new state regardless of current evidence. You can assume confidence while circumstances suggest uncertainty. You can assume abundance while temporary limitations exist. You can assume love while the reflection still shows traces of loneliness. The power lies in remaining faithful to the inner state rather than surrendering to external appearances. Every great transformation begins with this decision. The individual stops arguing with the mirror and starts changing the image being projected into it. They stop chasing symptoms and address the cause. Instead of demanding that the world become different, they become different within themselves. Their inner conversations change. Their assumptions change. Their expectations change. Gradually, the reflection begins to shift. At first, the outer world may seem unchanged. Old circumstances may continue to appear for a time. This is where persistence becomes essential. Many people abandon their new state too quickly because they continue judging reality by appearances. They return to fear, frustration, and doubt because the reflection has not yet caught up with the transformation occurring within. But those who persist understand that the mirror always follows the source. It cannot do otherwise. The moment you stop fighting the reflection, you free yourself from endless struggle. You realize that your power has never existed in circumstances, conditions, or the behavior of other people. Your power has always existed within your own consciousness. The outer world is simply responding to what is taking place there. Therefore, when you encounter something you do not like, resist the urge to battle the appearance. Do not waste your energy arguing with the mirror. Instead, go within. Change the assumption. Change the state. Change the story you tell yourself. As the source changes, the reflection must change as well. This is the law of life. The outer world always follows the inner world. The reflection can never lead. It can only follow. The greatest transformation in life does not occur when circumstances change. It occurs when you change your concept of yourself. Most people spend years waiting for evidence before they allow themselves to feel successful, loved, confident, or secure. They believe that once the promotion arrives, then they will feel successful. Once the relationship improves, then they will feel loved. Once the money appears, then they will feel abundant. In other words, they make their inner state dependent upon external conditions. But this way of living keeps them trapped in a cycle of waiting, because the outer world can only reflect what has already been accepted within. The secret is not to wait until life gives you permission to become the person you want to be. The secret is to assume that identity now, before the evidence appears, before the circumstances change, before the world confirms it. You must first become inwardly what you desire to experience outwardly. This is where true creation begins. Think about the version of yourself you wish to become. Perhaps it is someone who is confident, respected, financially secure, healthy, successful, or deeply loved. Most people view that version of themselves as existing somewhere in the future. They see it as a destination they must eventually reach. But what if that version already exists as a possibility within your consciousness? What if the only thing separating you from that reality is your willingness to identify with it now? Every identity carries its own assumptions, feelings, expectations, and reactions. A person who sees themselves as successful thinks differently from someone who sees themselves as a failure. A person who feels loved interprets life differently from someone who feels rejected. A person who feels abundant approaches opportunities differently from someone who feels lack. The difference is not merely in their circumstances. The difference begins in the state of consciousness they occupy. Most people try to change their lives while remaining the same person internally. They desire different results, but they continue thinking, feeling, and reacting from the same identity that created their current experience. As a result, little changes. They may take new actions, but their dominant assumptions remain unchanged. True transformation occurs when you stop asking, "How can I get what I want?" and begin asking, "Who would I be if I already had it?" This question shifts your focus from the external world to the internal one. Instead of chasing outcomes, you begin embodying the state that naturally corresponds with those outcomes. If your desire were already fulfilled, how would you see yourself? How would you think? How would you feel? How would you move through the world? These questions reveal the version of yourself you must begin assuming. At first, this may feel unfamiliar. Your senses may continue showing evidence of your current circumstances. Old habits of thinking may try to pull you back into previous states. Doubt may whisper that nothing has changed. But remember, every new identity feels unnatural until it becomes familiar. The person you are today was once a collection of repeated thoughts, feelings, and assumptions. Through repetition, they became your reality. In exactly the same way, a new self-concept can be established through consistent identification with the version of yourself you choose to become. This does not mean pretending or forcing yourself to believe something impossible. It means gradually accepting a higher vision of yourself as natural. It means refusing to define yourself by temporary appearances. It means living from the feeling of the wish fulfilled rather than constantly noticing its absence. The moment you assume the state of your desired self, you begin sending a new message into consciousness. That message becomes the blueprint from which future experiences emerge. The outer world always follows identity. People often believe that circumstances create confidence, but confidence is actually an expression of identity. They believe money creates abundance, but abundance is first a state of mind. They believe relationships create love, but love begins with the acceptance of being lovable. Everything originates within before it appears without. As you persist in assuming the version of yourself you desire to be, subtle changes begin to occur. Your thoughts become more aligned with your goals. Your reactions become more empowering. Opportunities that once seemed invisible become noticeable. The world starts responding differently because you are no longer operating from the same state. You have shifted the source, and the reflection must eventually follow. The person you wish to become is not waiting somewhere in the future. That version exists as a state available to you right now. You do not create it by struggling. You create it by assuming it. You step into it mentally, emotionally, and spiritually until it feels natural. Then life begins arranging itself around that new identity. Do not wait for the world to tell you who you are. Decide who you are. Assume the version of yourself you desire to be. Live from that state daily. Think from it, feel from it, and act from it. When you do, the world will eventually reflect the identity you have chosen. For the outer world can only mirror the person you believe yourself to be. There is a principle so powerful that once it is truly understood, it changes the way you look at every circumstance in life. Most people believe that change begins in the external world. They think they must first see different conditions, meet different people, earn more money, or receive better opportunities before their lives can improve. Because of this belief, They spend their energy trying to manipulate circumstances, control outcomes, and force results. Yet, despite all their efforts, many remain trapped in the same cycles. They continue experiencing similar challenges because they are attempting to change the effect while leaving the cause untouched. The real secret is that lasting transformation always begins within. Everything you experience in the outer world is connected to a state of consciousness that you have accepted as true. Your assumptions, beliefs, expectations, and feelings form an invisible blueprint from which your experiences emerge. Whether you are aware of it or not, your inner world is constantly shaping the reality you encounter. This means that if you desire a different life, you must first become a different version of yourself internally. The outer world cannot consistently display what the inner world does not first accept. Think of a gardener planting seeds. The gardener does not stand over the soil demanding immediate results. They understand that the harvest is determined by what has been planted. Once the seed is placed into the ground, the process begins beneath the surface, unseen by the eyes. In much the same way, every assumption you accept within yourself is a seed planted in consciousness. At first, nothing appears to change. The outer world may look exactly the same, but beneath the surface, a transformation is already taking place. The seed is growing, preparing to express itself in visible form. This is where many people become discouraged. They begin changing their thoughts and assumptions, but when immediate evidence does not appear, they return to old habits of doubt and fear. They look at current circumstances and conclude that nothing is happening. Yet they fail to realize that the outer world is always reflecting previous states. Today's conditions are often the result of yesterday's assumptions. If you wish to experience a different tomorrow, you must remain faithful to the new state you have chosen today. The moment you begin transforming within, you set powerful forces into motion. Your perception changes. Opportunities that once went unnoticed suddenly become visible. Ideas begin to flow more freely. Your reactions become different. Situations that once caused anxiety no longer have the same effect. You start moving through life with greater confidence because your identity is changing at the source. These internal shifts may seem small at first, but they eventually produce significant external results. One of the most remarkable aspects of inner transformation is the way life begins to rearrange itself without struggle. People often expect change to arrive through force or effort. They imagine they must push every door open. Yet when consciousness changes, events often unfold naturally. New opportunities appear unexpectedly. Relationships improve. Helpful people enter your life. Circumstances align in ways that seem almost impossible to explain. What appears to be coincidence is often the natural result of a new state expressing itself. This does not mean every change happens instantly. Just as a seed requires time to grow, new assumptions require persistence. The key is remaining loyal to the version of yourself you have chosen to become. Refuse to let temporary appearances convince you that nothing is changing. Refuse to return to old beliefs simply because the reflection has not fully caught up yet. Every moment spent dwelling in the new state strengthens it. Every moment spent identifying with your desired reality moves you closer to its physical expression. Many people underestimate the power of their inner conversations. They do not realize that the thoughts they repeatedly entertain become instructions given to consciousness. If you constantly tell yourself that life is difficult, the world finds ways to reflect that belief. If you repeatedly assume that success is available to you, life begins reflecting that assumption instead. The world is always responding, always rearranging, always mirroring the dominant state you occupy. This understanding brings tremendous freedom because it removes the need to fight reality. You no longer see yourself as a victim of circumstances. You no longer believe that your future depends on luck, chance, or the actions of other people. Instead, you recognize that the greatest power available to you is the ability to choose your state of consciousness. The moment you change that state, you begin changing the blueprint from which your life is created. So there is something you wish to experience. Do not begin by asking how the world will change. Begin by asking who you must become within. Adopt the feeling, the belief, and the identity of the person who already possesses what you desire. Persist in that state regardless of appearances. Trust the process even when the evidence is not yet visible. For when you truly transform within, the outer world has no choice but to rearrange itself. New pathways emerge. New possibilities appear. New experiences enter your life. The reflection changes because the source has changed. And that is the great secret: transform within and watch the world rearrange itself to match the person you have become. As we come to the end of this message, remember the most important truth. It was never the world. It was always you. The circumstances you experience, the opportunities you encounter, the relationships you attract, and the results you see are all responding to the state you consistently occupy within yourself. The outer world is not the author of your story. It is merely the screen upon which your inner assumptions are projected. The good news is that if your world is a reflection, then you never need to fear it. You don't need to fight it, chase it, or force it to change. Instead, go to the source. Change the concept you hold of yourself. Change the story you tell yourself. Change the feeling you accept as true. When you begin to see yourself as worthy, life reflects worthiness. When you see yourself as successful, life reflects success. When you feel loved, valued, and secure within, the world begins to echo those qualities back to you. Everything changes the moment you realize that the power you've been searching for has never been outside of you. It has always been within you. And when you consciously choose a new state, the world has no choice but to rearrange itself in harmony with that choice. The reflection follows the source. Always remember that. Thank you for spending this time with us today. If this message resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on the powerful truth you've heard. Don't simply listen to these ideas, apply them. Begin observing your thoughts, your assumptions, and the story you tell yourself every day. That is where real transformation begins. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss future content designed to inspire and elevate your consciousness. And remember, the moment you change within, your world begins to change around you. Carry that truth with you today and every day moving forward. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next